Allison, and on behalf of Barnes' family, I want to welcome you here today. We're so happy that you're here with us. When Barnes asked me to do this, I was incredulous for two reasons. The first is, those who know me know I am the biggest crybaby in the Upper Valley, possibly the entire country. And secondly, how could I or any of us do justice to the legacy of this extraordinary man? How could I possibly find the words? But he thought I could do it, and he promised me he would be right here. So we'll see how this goes. Barnes and I have been friends for over 50 years. We met as camp counselors at the Aloha camps, and he has been like family ever since. One of the great gifts of the last few months is that Barnes had time to prepare. He was able to have deep and important conversations with the people he loved. He was also able to plan this memorial. Many of you, no doubt, have read his beautiful and inspiring words on Caring Bridge. You'll hear stories today of Barnes as a dad, as a mentor, as a teacher, and as a friend. And while we are gathered to honor his life, he wanted it to be more than that. He wanted it to be an opportunity for us all to consider what's most important in our own lives and how we can strive to be the best version of ourselves. He really wanted it to be joyful. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to start by doing something that many of us love to do, which is to sing together.
Barnes was tickled about the thought of all of us coming together from so many different parts and chapters of his life. And he wondered whether, for some people, this would be the occasion in which they learned about his profound love of music. Barnes was a superb lyricist and songwriter, and the first song that we were going to sing together comes from the 1969 musical that he wrote called A Near Myth. The show is mostly forgotten. But this particular song is not. And I think that's because beneath the silly syllables lies a core conviction from the gospel according to Barnes. And that is this, that the thoughts that we think, the actions that we take, the stories that we tell, and even the songs that we sing can shape the emotions that we feel and can help us become the people that we want to be. On this day, when we may be struggling to find words to convey the immensity of our gratitude, on this day when our grief could so easily tip into gloom, how just like Barnes, how fitting it is that he has given us the perfect words to say and the perfect song to sing. We have some ringers here who know this one. And I'm going to ask them to help me sing the first verse through, and then we'll stop. And for those of you who haven't heard it, by then you'll know it, and we'll do the whole thing all the way through. All right, Marie. Okay.
Tell me the next time it's time to be Thank you, Bobby. Mike, please.
It's amazing to see everybody. Thank you for being here. I want to start. It's not on. Does that? Okay. Thank you for being here. I do want to start off with a couple appreciations. There was a memorial service planning committee, which my dad assembled, and he sat in our first meeting, kind of got the ball rolling, and I just, I'm appreciative of that. I'm sure my brother is too, because he wanted David and I involved, but not completely overburdened with all the details that go into planning an event like this. So that was appreciated, especially the specific committee members. We had Perry Allison, we had Jane Watson Stetson, Mark Roden, Andy Williams. Why not? I wanted to thank also the people that sort of had a hand in today, which is technically everybody that is here, but also thanks to the presenters and to the behind the scenes folks. I want to thank my cousin Mercer for getting out this morning on a bike ride on my dad's 2 e-bikes, matching e-bikes. This is just a good time. And then I wanted to touch on the coins. Dad designed these coins as mementos that were concepts near and dear to him. On one side you have the Velveteen Rabbit, which is a famous storybook that my dad adapted with Bob Love and Paul Pilcher of Camp Lanakila into a musical that was widely performed and very beloved by anybody that's been exposed to it. And the Velveteen Rabbit is a regular stuffed animal initially. It's an inanimate object, but through the course of the story, the rabbit turns real thanks to the love of a boy. The other side of the coin is a reference to the Serenity Prayer, which, if you're so inclined, we are going to say, I've asked my mom to start us off. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Okay, so that was obviously an important mantra from my dad, potentially used at tough times. Housekeeping aside, I just wanted to use my time to share an anecdote from this summer. A couple weeks after my dad's diagnosis was, delivered, he schemed up a Sunday brunch that he wanted to do inside his garage, and this was late May or early June. A couple emails went out, and we had about 12 or so people come over, helping out with setup and food preparation, and we had this outstanding meal, beautiful Sunday morning, and we were hanging out in the garage around a square table. And before we actually started eating, my dad said a few words. He spoke a few words of gratitude. He read a poem that he had written, and he expressed joy. I mean, he was just really happy that day. If you were there that day, you could see everything was aligned, and he was just feeling joy and exuding joy. Something many of us, I'm sure, I've seen that mode before. Another thing he did that morning was to invite the brunch guests into something of a cancer support group, if you will, that we had sort of formed initially just with our family, but he was kind of wanting to expand that out a little bit. And he had a name that he came up with for the support group, which was the Fubar Chowder and Marching Society. Right? Which, if you're trying to hunt up like the origin of a chowder and marching society, it's a little bit hard to pin down. It's I think historically it's been used for a couple different purposes, but it doesn't really have a fixed meaning, so it can be whatever you want it to be. Actually, in that vein, he had a banner printed up. It was a big white banner with blue lettering, FUBAR Chowder and Marching Society. The thing had like carabiners attached to each corner, and he hung it up at the brunch. And it's now hanging in the living room of his house, which our family and friends are still, we still spend time there. But to me, that banner and everything behind it is just emblematic of my dad. I think it just reeks of Barnes Boffey. Because of his sense of humor, his sense of creativity, his appreciation for quality. Even with a cancer diagnosis that was terminal, he recognized that he had choices about how to interpret that information. And he ultimately he was able to decide how he wanted to feel about that situation. And that was helpful. He helped us out by showing us that example. My dad believed what Dr. William Glasser asserted, that human beings have basic instructions to be loving, powerful, playful, and free. And the last 3, 4, 5 months of his life, he proved that those needs can be met even in the greatest of difficulties. It was just a tremendous example, and I'm so thankful for him setting that example, as well as just so many things that he taught me. Dad is just a ballast in my life. He's a beacon. And thank you for being a great dad, big guy, and I love you. Rest easy.
Barnes wanted...
Excuse me, Peter. I think we're going to have trouble hearing you if you want.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Right bend over?
Point it up a little bit.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Good, thanks. All right. My wife says I talk too loudly. Did you hear that up here? So, Barnes wanted this to be read, this fundamental principles from a Buddhist scripture attributed to the teacher Buddha. And I was honored when Sharon and David asked me. I am of the nature to grow old. There is no way to escape growing old. I am of the nature to have ill health. There is no escape from having ill health. I am of the nature to die. There is no escaping death. All that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature of change. There is no way to escape being separated from them. My deeds are my closest companions. I am the beneficiary of my deeds. My deeds are the ground on which I stand.
Should have come up here with like Francis Tiafoe with a stack of towels. I don't know if you guys were watching the US Open, but anyhow. Let's see here. I'm David, Barnes' oldest son. I want to echo what Adam said. I mean, this, I think if you could take one thing away from this, I am just so honored by the outpouring of love and support, and just knowing the company that my father kept, such quality people. I'm just so touched by that. So thank you all for being here, and thank you all. In my case, I wanted to tell you, you don't get to choose your parents. You really have no control over that. It's really the luck of the draw. But in my case, I won the parent lottery. Because both Barnes and Sharon had a great thing going, really knowing their respective roles. I didn't come to understand all my history until later. I just had this really unbelievable childhood. Barnes was my father, and what a gift, a man who could have taught a master class in being a parent. In the early years, Barnes Boffey was my idol and role model. From the first Halloween I can remember, I was enshrined into his creativity as a Halloween costume designer extraordinaire. I was Batman and Dad was the Batmobile, carrying me around from my first trick-or-treating adventure. That day he would carry me on his shoulders as he often would. And if I were in a crowd like a bonfire, I would suddenly be the tallest person. I loved having him hold me so high above everyone else. Dad was an artist as a parent, and real life was his canvas. He used imagination to create a world where it was easy for a child to find a lane, thrive, and succeed. I mean, he was so good at being a parent. There were no off days. He had his A game as a father every single day. When I think about how frequently I haven't been able to do that, I mean, he was literally like the Lou Gehrig or Cal Ripken of dads. You couldn't take him off the field. There was November 4th, 1976, my dad holding me up like this so I could see Adam for the first time at Alice Peck Day Hospital. I wasn't allowed in the hospital, but there he was, Adam in my mom's arms, my dad holding me there. I was so disappointed. I mean, there was so much anticipation and talk with my younger brother. In fact, I don't think I knew he was going to be a boy. In classic Barnes Boffey fashion, we all had a role in naming Adam. I was 6.5 years old and heavily involved in these conversations. Mom got to choose the name of a girl, I got the name of a boy, and I chose Adam, and Dad got the middle name Mills, after his father, his middle name. And now Adam's stuck with the name that a 6-year-old gave him. By the time we moved to Post Mills, Vermont, in the fall of 1978, I was starting 3rd grade and nightly family dinners had become a staple. Starting a new school was difficult, and among our dinner conversations might have gone about me having difficulties holding my own on the playground. I mean, I had moved from the quiet streets of Fairlee, Vermont to the big meantime streets of Thetford Elementary School. I wasn't allowed to swear, and even though there was really no one monitoring me, I took these rules seriously. Dad had a general way of enforcing things that were absolutes but non-negotiable.
Dad would say, if they're swearing, don't swear back. Call them a lunchbox. Well, that wasn't quite working. I tried a few year lunchboxes instead of swearing on the playground, and it just wasn't working. I was getting 0 traction. But then something amazing happened. Someone must have seen Dad drop me off at school during one of those first few weeks, and what I came to realize in those days in 1978, being rather naive, was all arguments started and ended with, my father can beat up your father. So suddenly I didn't need to call anyone a lunchbox or even defend myself anymore. Oh man, there were lessons learned. Leaving a campsite cleaner than you found it. This was used across really a lot of things in life. It takes more of a man to walk away from a fight than to hit back. It was a really hard one for me, but it served me well many times. It's okay for a man to hug another man. It's okay for a man to cry. And then playing It's All Right to Cry by Rosie Greer from Free to Be You and Me, frequently when I was growing up. Rules had a purpose, so there wasn't a long list, but each one had a reason. as a young child, there were no TV nights. That was for me, not Adam. Never leave the house mad. Always say I love you, the last thing you said before you walked out the door. And then as a teenager, curfews. In the Barnes Boffey household, there were family meetings. Dad had a family meeting log with copious notes that only he could read. And then on Sundays, we would discuss family business to ensure that we were on the same page. If issues needed to be worked out, they were worked out there. And then at the end, there were appreciations for all family members. There were Easter egg hunts. Dad just used to put together incredible Easter egg hunts. You might find an Easter egg in a couch cushion or tucked behind a wall 7 months later. There was a democratic choice of cassette tapes on road trips. Our most frequent road trip we took was to our grandparents' house, which took about 3 hours, so there were 4 of us. We each got a cassette, which took about 45 minutes. Now, big old Barnes Boffey, while his record collection at those times was probably dominated by the Beatles and Bob Dylan, I mean, he might throw on Linda Ronstadt or ABBA. And yes, his music taste was eclectic, but part of it was the reaction he was going to get from the back seat, which would go something like this, like, "Dad, are you kidding me, Anne Murray?" There were a lot of roles he played. Little League coach, Cub Scout, and Weeblo's leader. Even though he wasn't a baseball aficionado, he was amazingly effective. The no booing mantra he learned at Lanakila was something that he implemented across multiple platforms like the Little League field or Cub Scouts or anywhere he had an influence. And on the Little League field, the way you played the game itself is more important, not winning or losing. Respecting your opponent and winning with grace was just as important as losing with dignity. There are times that he stood up for the kid on kid on the opposing team, and he was like that. In those early days of Little League, I would step in the bucket, meaning I was just scared of the ball, so I'd kind of bail out. Dad took me to the side of the garage with a bucket of tennis balls and threw them over and over again until I overcame that fear of stepping in the bucket. And later that spot would become like kind of our home run derby sanctuary. And at a young age, it was very apparent I was going to be a big sports fan as I was obsessed with it. And I think if you had grown up where I did, your fandom would have been predetermined. You're a Patriots, Celtics, and Red Sox fan. But when Barnes is your father, you have some freedom to make your own choices. It's no surprise I latched onto the Pittsburgh Steelers with his association with it, and that they were winning Super Bowls in the mid-'70s. And then I was also a Philadelphia 76ers and a Red Sox fan, so I think that unique collection of teams was really created by that freedom of choice. And then there was Dad at Lanakila. I mean, as a living legend there, camper, counselor, leader, assistant director, and then director, he was helping run the place, but he wanted me and Adam to find our own place. I mean, you could almost go the entire summer without seeing him, except during those epic mealtime announcements, which was just like another big moment of pride. And then seeing him raise his hand and knowing the exact precise moment to do it, and then watching 250 people come to silence immediately. So moving forward, as I'm playing the back nine of my life, I often think, what kind of man do I want to be, and what do I still want to accomplish? As a child, when Adam and I got in trouble, and we got sent to our room, it had a purpose. It was to come out of there, and even if it took half a day, you needed to present a plan to Dad before being allowed to come back into civilization. It wasn't necessarily punishment, although there was a lesson to be learned. How do I figure this out on my own so that I don't keep making the same mistake or mistakes again? Well, his inspiration will be with me forever. I mean, what do I want? What am I doing about it? And is it working? And focus on what I can control and try not to worry about the things out of my control. Dad, thank you for literally carrying me on your back, for stopping what you were doing a million times, for always being there every moment, joyful or difficult. Dad used to always end his letters to me with these words, I love you today, tomorrow, and always. So, well, Dad, I love you too. Today, tomorrow, and always. Thank you.
The next song that Barnes programmed for us this morning comes from the musical The Velveteen Rabbit, which, as Adam mentioned, Barnes wrote with Paul Pilcher with the help of Bob Love in 1972. The song comes from a scene in which the wise old skin horse transforms the way the young rabbit sees the world and his place in it. Like the bunny, we live in a society, a culture that too often treats success as a proxy for worth, that buys into the mirage that something's price is the truest determinant of its value. I think that for so many of us, Barnes was our wise old skin horse, someone who transformed the way we see the world and the way we see our role in it, someone who helped us understand that there is no force more powerful in this universe nor more real than love.
As I mentioned earlier, Barnes and I have been friends for over 50 years. My first wonderful dog, a blonde lab, was a puppy from Barnes's dog Sunshine's litter. He was at my wedding 40 years ago. He officiated my daughter Abigail's wedding and has been an incredible mentor and inspiration to my son Dewey, who spent many a glorious summer at Camp Lanakila. Barnes has been one of the most devoted, dedicated friends in my life. His generosity knew no bounds. A camp friend told me a story recently about how she ran into him at an event and commented on how much she liked his hat. He promptly took it off and gave it to her. That's the kind of generous friend he was. In a recent conversation, Barnes asked me how I was doing. He always asked the hard question and expected nothing less than an honest answer. Well, there have been no shortage of challenges in my life between some health issues, living in a house under construction, but most of all, preparing to lose him. I told him that what was weighing most heavily was his impending passing. He then paused and asked me what he could do to make that easier for me. Even in the face of his own death, he was worried about me. As I said at the outset, this service is not just about Barnes, but about all of us, living our best life with honesty and integrity. Jeremy's going to talk a bit later about Barnes as a teacher, but I'm going to share 5 lessons that I learned from Barnes. 1, show up. Barnes showed up in countless ways for me and so many others. He always seemed to be the friend you needed when you needed them. He would be there with the deep questions, the loving response, with the joke when you needed to laugh. 2, follow up. One of the things we learn at camp in the success counseling model is that while working with someone who's struggling, we help them create a plan for how they want to be in a certain situation, and then we make sure to follow up the next day to see how it's going. Barnes lived that philosophy. He never neglected to send a note after being at our house for dinner. He would thank us for the time and the food and the friendship. He always followed up. 3, prioritize the relationships in your life. No one in my life sends me a birthday card and an anniversary card every year. And I know I'm not alone. Barnes would schedule, in the darkest days of the pandemic, Barnes would schedule Zoom calls to stay in touch. He told me recently how happy he was that he had chosen to surround himself only with people who brought joy and light to his life. His family and friends were the most important thing to him. 4, look for the best in people always, everywhere. I watched him live this philosophy everywhere he went. At a restaurant, he would always make the server feel valued and important. An example of this was at our local spot that he loved, Unclebee's. He would often ride his bike to meet someone on the patio. And before he had even sat down, the servers would deliver his coffee to him. They loved him and they found a way to show him that. At a party, he would always connect with the children and the dogs. I've often thought the measure of a person is how dogs and children respond to them. With Barnes, they knew he was something special, this jungle gym of a man with a goofy smile. 5, find joy wherever you go. Was there anyone who had a deeper well of jokes to share? I could never fathom how he could remember them all, but he told me that if you tell a joke 3 times, it'll stick. He always had a new one to share, and he told them with great skill. I heard a rumor that there's a collection of jokes being assembled to immortalize the Boffey joke repertoire. He told me that over the last few months, in order to capture the collection, he would wake up in the middle of the night often, and he would grab his phone and record a joke. And then in the morning, he would transcribe it. So, look out for that collection. Okay, let's review. Show up. Follow up. Prioritize the relationships in your life. Look for the best in people always, and find joy wherever you go. The last thing I want to share with you is a dream that my daughter Abigail had about Barnes. It's such a wonderful visual that I hope you'll all smile. She dreamt that she was lying in a field, looking up, missing Barnes and feeling very sad, and she suddenly saw him striding through the clouds full of energy and vim and vigor. And he looked down at her and he gave her a loving wink. She shared that story with him. So now I'm going to ask you all to take a minute to close your eyes and think about a special time. I warned you. With Barnes and how he made you feel. Feel the warm glow of his attention and his love, and tuck it away. I know he'll be right here for me. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for doing that before I get to sing.
Kiss today goodbye. Thank you. There we go. My name is Cindy Pierce. My friendship with Barnes was relatively new compared to many of yours, which has been for many decades. In my remarks, I'm going to share about my connection with Barnes, his impact on me and some of my friends, and I'm going to end with a bit about true elders. So most of us remember the first time we met Barnes, and when I was in teacher training in the 90s, I got my first sniff of the Barnes Boffey sauce. And we had a lot of presenters as a group, but then in rolls Barnes with all this razzle dazzle, and he's got all his cha-cha he's got going. And of course he shared this next level teaching wisdom and perspective. And of course he didn't hold back about telling us how our insecurities and our fears would be rattled and exposed by kids when we're as teachers. But somehow he also instilled in us that there was beauty and importance in all of those things. Years later, Barnes attended one of my comic storytelling shows about life, sex, and relationships, and he invited me to speak at Lanakila. And Barnes and I quickly learned that many of our ideas about life aligned. And our friendship really caught fire when we started having conversations about addressing the needs of boys and men, matters of the heart, family, and our different approaches to helping people do the work to improve their relationships. We talked a lot about managing our imperfections. And Barnes, he owned his flaws and his mistakes, and he was proud to have tried his best to heal relationships right up until the day he died. Now, one of my close friends told me that even though Barnes is gone, it's almost like having him right on his shoulder, reminding him what the best version of himself would do in a given situation. And when my friend considers what Barnes' advice would be, it is always that the answers are within him, and he can find those. The emotional courage Barnes modeled was beyond most humans. And I felt lucky to be able to have a monthly meeting with him, either on Zoom when he was away or in person. Now, he's never hard to find in a restaurant, not just his height, no. The Barnes sauce was booming with that big smile, the hat, the colorful shirts, always. And he just came dazzling into the restaurant. And we would get right to the heart of it, right? We had these big laughs and a lot of tears in our conversations every time we met. And our already loud voices would get louder as we got really excited about the topics, which were rarely great for public consumption, like dicey, in fact. And of course, his hearing aids didn't work very well in the restaurants, so my voice got a lot louder. And I remember a few lunches at Tucker Box with silent tables of eavesdroppers, people turning their heads in curiosity, but that didn't slow us down, of course. And Michelle, who works at Tucker Box, many of you know, she and Barnes were very close. Now, she had every right to come over and tell us to hush or kick us out, but no, she'd come over with a conspiratorial smile and throw a little fire on the, little gas on the fire and let us rip. Now, his naughty jokes at that volume were always risky in public, but they were irresistible. Now, even though I'm in the business of being a funny person, I cannot remember a joke. I cannot deliver a joke. Barnes had to walk me to the punchline. I mean, I've got some limitations in this area, which is interesting, but sometimes I like the joke so much, I was like, I gotta remember this one. So I'd start taking notes, and I'd take a few notes. Now, the problem is I have my Barnes wisdom file at home, and a few months ago I went through that file, and some of those scraps of paper showed up with like half-baked Barnes jokes, with these naughty words that I was like, I gotta get rid of these. My grandchildren cannot find these. Recycle them, my goodness. But he could tell the joke like nobody's business. July 29th was our last visit, and I expected him to be compromised, but he popped out of his car in a swirl of color and enthusiasm about his 50-mile e-bike ride just 2 days before, which clearly converted to like this energy and this feeling of feeling capable, despite what his body was up against at that time. And I was deeply touched when he asked me to speak to you here. And during our lunch, I took more notes. I was grabbing everything I could, not knowing this would be our last visit, but I was taking notes for my files. And while parting ways, he reminded me that it could all go south very quickly, and that he was enjoying his good days and his good chunks of those days. And may we all be so lucky, right, to have a 50-mile bike ride 2 weeks before we head home. Now, Barnes mentored hundreds and hundreds of us. And somehow he made us feel like we mentored him. And he enjoyed learning and growing and hearing other people's ideas right till he left this world. And every conversation we had came back to connection and gratitude. And his eyes welled up with tears every time we spoke of the gratitude he felt for all of his friends and family, and how you took care of him physically and emotionally. And recently, Barnes and I talked more about the business of his dying. And he was confident that he had said what he needed to say and to his people, and had done his best to heal the conflicts. And many of you have heard him say it all comes back to having difficult conversations. And I loved how he said, difficult conversations let me see if I'm really the person I say I am. And was he ever? Now, my friend Marissa Donovan wrote a beautiful tribute to Barnes. And I could have easily missed it, because during that week after Barnes died, it was very busy. And so I happened to see her post, and it really touched my heart. Somehow it found me. And I was moved by her spot-on assessment that said he moved back into the light with the same awe-inspiring clarity, heart, and purpose that he marked his days among us, And then his post on Caring Bridge reminded us to live and leave, how to leave when our time comes. Now, as an adult, I haven't dreaded death, I'm not scared of death, and now that I'm storming down the back nine of life, I can kind of see the exit ramps kind of around the corner. I'm really comfortable with that. But in these past few months of speaking with Barnes and reading his words, I'm strangely excited about death. And that's never happened before with anyone else. Only Barnes could get us all fired up to head on home, I mean, it's kind of weird and it feels disrespectful in a way, but I think some of you know what I'm feeling. Now, Marissa had another sentence in her tribute that captures how many of us felt having Barnes in our sphere. She said, Barnes made me feel important, valued, and tightly held. And those two words, tightly held, made my breath catch. Boy, she nailed it. Barnes had the bandwidth to make so many people feel tightly held. And this brings me to some thoughts about how we could honor Barnes by doing that for others. The week after Barnes died, I had the random chance to connect with a former student I hadn't seen in 30 years. Ronan Donovan is a storytelling fellow with the National Geographic Society focused on conservation issues relating to wolves and chimpanzees. Now, it felt like the universe totally aligned to connect us because Ronan is Marissa Donovan's brother-in-law. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And then when my conversation with Ronan led to his writing about true elders and healthy masculinity, it felt like Barnes had orchestrated my connection to Marissa and Ronan's words and led me to what I wanted to say today. And in Ronan's article about chimpanzee, he discussed the needs for proper elders, true elders who usher the transition of younger members into mature, initiated adults. He points out this is true for wolves, for humans, and all animals that live in groups. And Ronan's descriptions of true elders was all Barnes Boffey. A fully formed, balanced teacher, balanced leader is selfless, decisive, and grounded in service to others. Balanced and mature men are not threatened by the success and creativity of those they lead. True elders who provide and protect create a sense of belonging for the members of a group and become the foundation that keeps the community whole. And they lead with humility and experience rather than by insecure force. Barnes modeled for us how to keep learning, growing, and healing despite our imperfections and because of our imperfections. And we lost a true elder. And we can honor Barnes by collectively filling that void. Now, many of us don't feel equipped, or ready for such an endeavor, and I'm right there with you. I'm glitching around life with all my sketchiness, healing the wounds, hoping not to pass on too much of my crap to the next gen. But in all that, we tend to forget that we also have life experience and wisdom and strength needed by people younger than us more than ever. We can lean into this by deepening our emotional house cleaning and accepting there'll always be some clutter and dust dangling around, but keep at it, get some counseling, people, Barnes would say. And Barnes, who was one of the greatest examples of a true elder, would tell us to let go of being deficit focused. And rather than trying to get rid of what is wrong with us, turn on the light, because light will always take care of the darkness. Thank you.
I think they can do it. Yeah, they seem very talented. Yeah.
All right, this next song came to Camp Lanakila from Bob Love, who was the longtime director of music there. And then when Bob died, Barnes thought, you know what, what a great tribute. Love changes everything. So it became Bob's song at camp. And it's the sort of song where when you hear it, every time you hear it, a different line sticks out in a new way to you. We're going to try to sing it through with those ringers and plants in the audience helping us through the first verse, give everyone a sense of it, and then we'll...
Because he wanted us all to sing it together.
And we'll all go from there, okay?
So will we repeat that first?
We will.
Okay. We'll sing it, and then everyone just the whole...
If you know the song, we're going to sing the first verse. You've got it in your ear. If that doesn't go, we'll stop, and we'll learn it. I think we can do it. Let's try it once. It's the first verse. Love changes everything.
talk about all the different aspects that make up Barnes Boffey. They're all a little bit different, but all equally powerful. Barnes himself liked to talk about the multiple people that made up him. Barnes the warrior, the shaman, the poet, the mentor, and of course Barnes the teacher, which is the Barnes I'll be talking about. So for close to 40 years, I've either been teaching with Barnes at camp, in a university setting, in private workshops, or I've been the recipient of his teaching. And boy, has it shaped my life. I'm sure pretty much here everyone would agree, because Barnes was always teaching, like pretty much every minute he was on this earth, as far as I can tell. Even in his very last days, he continued to teach and counsel us, almost secretly. How many people here, when they found out Barnes was sick, went to see him or give him a call, ostensibly to provide him with support, good wishes, and pick me up, maybe some helpful words, pay it back for everything that he's done for you? Lots of us, I'm sure. Lots of hands, yeah. And then how many of you walked away, shaking your heads in disbelief, maybe even quasi-disgust, because you realized the majority of that Zoom call, or a cup of coffee, or a chat over a scone at Uncleby's, was Barnes counseling you, helping you to feel better, teaching you about life and happiness and balance and whatever else you were going through at the time. It was infuriating. This man is dying and he's helping me? He loved to turn the tables on us. He couldn't help himself. At Lanakila, the camp where many of us worked with Barnes for so many years, one of the books that he brought to the leadership team was The Last Lecture by Randy Pausch. It was a book adapted by a speech that Pausch gave at Carnegie Mellon, basically about the last days of his life. And one of the concepts that Barnes loved was the teaching head fake. Some of you are probably familiar with that term in sports. It's kind of when you use your head and body to pretend to go one way, and then you go in a different direction, fooling your opponent. So on a similar note, the teaching head fake is when you teach in a way so that the learner doesn't realize what they're learning, or rather thinks they're learning one thing, and then later realizes that teaching has been about something entirely different the whole time. Barnes was an absolute master at this. He could design just about anything: a summer camp, a college course, an adult workshop, a teacher training program, a staff meeting that uses head fake philosophy. We went in, we thought we were mostly having fun, playing with new concepts, being silly and uninhibited, but really what we were doing was learning skills and values and ideas that would become central to how you live your life. One tiny example of this is at Lanakila, the staff, many of whom are here right now, loved coming to staff meetings on Sunday nights. Now, the words love and meetings are probably not words that most of you as sentient beings have ever used in a sentence together. And that is, for a fact, these meetings start at 9:30 p.m. after an exhausting day of work. That didn't matter to the Lanakila staff, because they knew that when Barnes spoke, the words coming out of his mouth wouldn't be minutia or nagging about details or slogging through some point-by-point bullet points. They knew that in that hour, they would be learning something profound, seeing the values behind the actions that had been taken, and learning concepts that would help them to grow as a person. Does that sound like a typical meeting to you? Probably not, unless Barnes was your boss. I can go on and on about how masterful Barnes' teaching was, but most of us know that from personal experience. And Barnes also hated the long lectures or meetings or services. In fact, he gave us a hard time limit on this one right here, so watch the clock. But I do want to give one thought as to what it was like to teach with him, because I think it sums up who he was as a person. We spent many years co-teaching courses and workshops together, and they were the most fun and illuminating experiences of my professional life. And I'll say this, he was the most generous and kind and thoughtful teaching partner I could imagine, full stop. I'll also admit that having a partner like Barnes made the teaching at times feel like a pretty light lift for me. Imagine entering a 2-on-2 basketball tournament with LeBron James as your partner. You probably wouldn't be too concerned the night before about who was going to bring home the trophy. But that is the most hilarious part about it. When we would review our lesson plans the night before first class, or even more so, we'd be driving to the site together at 7:30 a.m. on the morning of the workshop, Barnes would be legitimately, palpably nervous. At first I found this kind of hilarious, and I wasn't sure if it was some kind of bit or act he was doing. But no, it happened every time we did a workshop or a talk or a class together. He'd be behind the wheel and he'd really express to me how worried he was about the day ahead. And now I began to get uncomfortable. To be honest, I was already on the edge, riding in the passenger seat with one of the more creative drivers known to mankind. I see a lot of you have ridden in a car before. Okay, say no more. But I would try to reassure Barnes that he had forgotten more about counseling and choice theory before breakfast than I, or anyone I could think of, had ever known, period. But I could never quite talk him down. That is until we got an hour into the first day and he locked right into his legendary groove, of course. But over the years, I thought a lot about what was behind this nervousness from the person in the world who had the least reason to be nervous. And I think I figured out where it came from. It wasn't about ego. Barnes was humble about his gifts. Certainly wasn't about inexperience. It wasn't because of perfectionism. Barnes knew what a terrible, unhealthy standard that was. He didn't succumb to that. Simply put, it was because Barnes loved and cared so much. So much about the people that he was teaching. So much about the content that he was teaching. So much about using his content to really, truly help people. He cared so much that the people would use these ideas to become the best versions of themselves and to be as happy as they could be. He cared so much about being able to change the world through giving people the tools that he had many years ago used to transform his own life. I know this because at the end of a good day, he would no longer be jittery. Instead, he'd be elated and exclaim to me, "You know, I think we really helped some people today. I think this is really going to make a difference in some of the lives of these people. Aren't we so lucky to be doing this?" Again, it's vintage Barnes, but I was still so taken aback by how focused and concerned he was with the well-being of all the people that he was teaching. Why would I suspect otherwise? He loved people, he loved service, he loved sharing his gifts. Okay, so I'm starting to hear him on my shoulder here, saying, "Wrap it up, Cutler. We got some more to go here." So I'm going to close by returning to my first example here. How is he continuing to teach us, even if he's no longer with us in body? And I've been barraged recently with a lot of truly lovely, "How are you doing?" texts and calls and emails. And I had to stop for a second and think about that. How am I doing? And probably one answer is the same as a lot of us here. I felt a deep sadness, sense of loss, confusion, some pity, some guilt maybe mixed in there, some dread for the days ahead. But then I will remember what Barnes has spent his entire life, not his entire life, my entire life, teaching me, and probably all of you, that those are my feelings, and they're totally okay, and normal, unavoidable, even. It'd be crazy not to have them, and I can sit with them for as long as I like. But those are feelings, not emotions. Those aren't the same. I don't have a lot of control over my feelings, but I do have some control over creating my emotions, which is what's going to stick with me. And so how do we do that? Well, he would say by changing our thinking and telling ourselves stories about what Barnes meant to us and to this earth. Those thoughts and stories are what creates the emotions within us. So what stories have I, and many of you, been telling yourselves about Barnes? 1. How lucky were we to be brought into contact with him, really by pure chance? Barnes would always say that he was going to trust the universe to reveal a miracle that he was waiting for. And he was that miracle for us. 2, how different and better are our lives for having known him? 3, how fun was it to be his friend? And how lucky are we to be able to keep those memories forever? 4, how much has he shaped us in a way that can never be taken away? And 5, how much will he live on in the way that we continue to treat other people and think about life differently than many people do? And how proud will he be that we are carrying his spirit on in this way? And when I think those thoughts and tell those stories, guess what? My feelings of sadness turn into emotions of gratitude and happiness and love and even excitement for the next stages of carrying Barnes' awesome legacy forward and sharing that voyage with everybody here. And I feel an enduring love for Barnes and a love for all the years that we have all spent together with him and all the years that we get to continue to spend together with him. Skål.
Hi, my name is Jane Stetson. Barnes had an opening for a speaker, and I wanted to raise my hand, but I also wanted to have the perfect thing to say. So I was going through Mary Oliver and other poetry, and I thought, I can't do that. So I raised my hand. So Barnes, in his inimitable way, sent me something that he had written for me to read, which I will do now. Live well, it matters. Our lives are not exercises from school that have no relevance. They have the ultimate relevance. Our lives can damage other people. Our lives can heal other people. Our lives can nourish other people. And our lives can transform other people. Our lives become the stars that others steer by. And if we live them well, the world will change. Live well, it matters. If there were some other alternatives to dying, it would be different. We could plan for our final passage in life as though we were taking a vacation. Where will I go? What do I want to do when I'm no longer a living human being? The truth is that death awaits us all. That is both the sad news and the joyous news. Live well, it matters. Because it is true, our challenges as we leave this gathering today is to be who God has asked us to be, and to live each day as one we can be proud of, to live each day as one we can cherish, and to live each day as one that will be remembered by others who look to us to learn how to live. That is the challenge left to us. Live well, it matters.
Okay, well, I want to give a nod to the people that are joining us really from all over the world on our live stream. We're happy that you are with us. And I want to thank all of you for being here today. We hope the medallions will be something that you will take with you to remind you of Barnes. If you didn't sign the guest book on your way in, we hope you will. We'll have it down at the reception. And there's going to be a reception down below, which we hope you'll join us. So I know that the guest book will be something the family will treasure. So thank you for being here, and I don't know what else to say.